future.
Drastically. If this is true, then what can we expect from the future? Before we start,
Having fun.
I'm having fun, Ken.
I'm glad you are having fun, Shelly. I didn't pay her to say that. Shelly Brisbin's here with us, everybody. Because it sort of sounded like my question sounded perfunctory, but yay, I hope you are having a good time. And I hope everybody else is too, listening to me, but listening to Shelly Brisbin, host of Parallel online at relay.fm/parallel.
That's the one.
Or you can follow her on Facebook. No, Facebook. I don't know if you're, no, not Twitter. Twitter is what I meant to say. Facebook. My grandma's on Facebook.
I was going to say, there allegedly I have a Facebook profile that I had to get for my job.
Yeah.
Or that I had to keep for my job, I should say, because I had deactivated my account, and then I got this silly job where I needed to have it. So I won't. If you find me on Facebook, I won't follow you back. Let me put it that way.
At Shelly on Twitter is what I meant to say. At Shelly, SHELLY.
That's right.
Just about as easy as it could be on Twitter. Twitter.com/Shelly. Happy New Year.
Why, thank you, Ken. Happy New Year to you.
Eventually. Yeah. I was talking last week on this show about the fact that even though it is far from the new year, I'm now to the place where it's okay that I'm starting to see Christmas candy turn up in the store. Honestly, I feel like it's a little bit too early for that, but I also know that they're going to be sold out of a lot of the Christmas candy a week and a half to 2 weeks before Christmas. So these are the way things go. The thing is, if you look at the calendar, there are only about 7 or 8 more weeks of this show before it's 2022, which is crazy. There's a pretty good chance you will not be back on this show, at least not for a full week, until sometime in 2022. And so might as well start now looking at the future with everybody who's on. Yeah.
It's been since before WWDC that I was on, Ken.
Is that true for any episode?
Oh, now I guess I could look that up, but that's my memory of it, at least for a full week.
For a full week, that's absolutely true. Well, people who have been listening to this show know that it hasn't been there to listen to about a third of the time this year.
That's true. You're a busy man. You've got all sorts of things going on.
Yes, let's say it's because I'm busy. Why don't we do that? Anyway, 2022 is, just around some corner.
Around the corner.
And so what I find myself wanting to do for the rest of the year is everybody I'm talking to, finding out from them. Really, it's 2 things. We'll divide it up into 2 segments. The first is, what do you expect from Apple in 2022? And then the second part, we'll do, what do you want from Apple in 2022? And if they are, in fact, the same things, I'm going to ask you to make something up for the second part.
Okay. I feel like the what do I expect is a super easy one, because more Apple Silicon computers, especially now that we have the new chips from the that we've seen in the MacBook Pro. I think you get your bigger iMac with the super fast chips. I think you get maybe even multiple chips of that super fast variety within iMacs. So you get an iMac Pro. You almost certainly get a Mac Pro. I mean, I don't think they can credibly keep selling a Mac Pro that is not Apple Silicon based at this point, and I think they know that. So that feels like a super easy softball in terms of what's going to come in 2022. At the very least. How
many Mac Pros do you think they're actually selling? I mean, that's not to say that it's not to say that nobody's buying them. It's more to say that when the Mac Pro comes out, I would imagine anybody who's interested in the Mac Pro gets it. It doesn't feel like the kind of thing where there's a sort of like, oh man, my MacBook Air crapped out, so I need a new laptop, right? It's not. I mean, it's. Well, I wonder how much of a market driver that is, because I'll tell you part of the reason I bring it up. Last week with Brian Chaffin, we were talking about the fact that is one of the things that he's expecting as well. But of course, you have the thing that you started talking about at the beginning of the week with all the other chips and all the other stuff that has to go into it, and whether or not they're actually able to deliver them. Do they announce a Mac Pro and secretly only have about 10 of them to sell, but at least they've announced it and they've completed their transition? Or do they wait until they can actually meet demand? And what does demand for a machine like that even look like?
I mean, that's an interesting question. And I live and work in this sort of weird, rarefied universe where podcasters whose primary use of, or much of their use of Macintosh computers, I should say, is to make podcasts and to, in some cases, program. But I know at least 2 people who have Mac Pros, but those are not necessarily the intended market, but they're people who have a lot of disposable income and feel like they have to have them. So I always feel like they're totally oversubscribed in terms of the universe of people I know who have them.
Right.
And I do not, and nor do I ever expect to. But yeah, I mean, I don't know how many. I think that's an interesting idea that somehow they make them available to. I'm sure that there are some probably movie studios and special effects houses where they'll take all the Mac Pros you can give them.
Sure.
And where, in fact, they want to be because they want to be seen incidentally in documentaries about the making of some film, or they want some director to come in and say, I've had a Mac Pro and it's changed my life. It's
so weird to me, though, because I was talking about that with Adam Christensen a couple of weeks ago in the Post Unleashed event. And he almost seems to have a reverence for the Mac Pro that Werner Vinge had for the Singularity. I asked him, okay, so what are we going to be able to do with this? And he honestly, I think he thought that I was saying there's no point in it. And what I was actually saying was give me something concrete. And the problem was he couldn't give me anything concrete because it's so theoretically exponentially more powerful that it's hard to know. I mean, you're limited by your imagination. Now, really quickly, there was a guy, and I only remember his name because I've met him, Jules Erbach, the guy on the Unleashed event who was showing that 3D rendered, Starship Enterprise. The level of detail, the level of quality, the level of everything in that, and he was doing it with an M1 Max, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is it just having more of the M1 Maxes? It's like when we slap 9 of these into a Mac Pro, and so,
Probably.
Pretty much the second you think of the thing, the Mac Pro has rendered it. Exactly.
I think 2 things go on with the Mac Pro for people who are fans of it, who may not necessarily need it, who don't necessarily need it. Let's just go that far. The 2 things are happening is nostalgia for the powerful desktop Mac. Because I think even people who were impressed by the iMac Pro, RIP, are fans of whether it was the old cheese grater or some sort of tower. They're thinking people, and Adam is certainly a person who's old enough to have had that experience. And I know people from my days in Mac user back in the 90s who certainly feel this way. It's like, let's find the most powerful Mac out there. It's clearly going to be a desk side machine. And I think there's nostalgia for that sort of modular device. And I think the second thing is there's always going to be a desire to have the fastest, the bestest. And you don't necessarily have a daily driver use for it. But if maybe you're a podcaster and you decide to do a show with 8 tracks and, somebody is really echoey, let's run a lot of de-reverb and processing and all that kind of stuff, then we can see whether it pegs the processor or not, and it won't because it's a Mac Pro. Could you have done that with a little bit less processing power? Probably. Does it matter because maybe you do that once every 6 months? Could you wait? Probably. But there's just this desire. Anybody who's a fan of anything wants the best and the most of the thing that they're a fan
of. Let's check the in a few minutes bulletin board. Someone has lost a sock. Vintage tube sock, circa 1978. White, with 3 green rings around the calf. If you find it, leave it here. Someone needs a ride to next week's podcast potluck. Hey, that reminds me, everyone cannot bring macaroni and cheese again. I mean, macaroni and cheese is great. But we had 9 kinds last time. Someone, please bring the protein. Someone has lost a kitten. It answers to no name yet, but it does come to the sound of treats being opened, and is just the cutest thing. Gray, with big green eyes. If you find it, leave it here. The In a Few Minutes bulletin board is a public service of this podcast. If you have an announcement for the bulletin board, leave it here.
Back now with Shelly Brisbin, host of Parallel, online at relay.fm/parallel. You know what makes me sad about the thing you were saying just before we went to break? Where be thy snack time? You set up some, hardcore process, and it's like, oh man, this is going to take as long as it takes me to make a peanut butter sandwich.
Well, I mean, Apple's given us all these focus modes, but we can't use any of them because the machine is like, okay, what's next? Let's go.
Right, exactly. Well, one day, it's okay. They won't have chips for them anyway, so it's fine. I'll make all the peanut butter sandwiches waiting to be able to take delivery of the Mac Pro, which I'm not getting, by the way. I mean, because you keep saying, podcasters and whatever. There is no part. I mean, it's not true that there's no part of me that wants one, but there's no part of me that even considers for a moment getting one of these things.
Same here.
Because, I mean, and that's not to say that there's no use. It's just I know my use case. I have a 15-inch MacBook Pro that I've had for 3 years now. Before that, I was doing everything I was doing for about 2 years on a 2013 MacBook Air. I need a Pro like I need a hole to put a Pro in.
I mean, I have weirdly the thing that I notice most performance-wise is that Zoom makes my fan go on my 2019 MacBook Pro, and so my joke at work is the fan noise is really annoying in the Zoom meeting. Could you get me a newer computer? Although, I mean, I do podcasts where I have maybe 5 or 6 tracks.
Right.
But what I do to those podcasts does not say, get a MacBook Pro. It says, get a newer iMac because I want the M1. That level of difference between the Intel world and the M1 world, that's impressive and important, and it feels like important. Wow, what does that mean? It feels like it's something that I could benefit from even in my use case. Right. But mostly it's for fun. Like, I'm not sitting here struggling with my 2-year-old MacBook Pro unless somebody in purchasing at work is listening, in which case it's terrible and I need a new one right now.
2 things really quickly. Zoom makes my fan go, I'm pretty sure is your hip hop hit waiting to happen.
That or TikTok or something.
Yeah, right. Something like that. And then the other thing, I want to get to the other stuff because we talked about, because you're right. I mean, as I pointed out with Brian Chaffin last week, we are 1 year into Apple's 2-year transition. More Apple Silicon is a given. Even if they can't produce the machines, they can at least say, we have the parts. As soon as we get the other parts, we're good to go. The other thing I wanted to hit is, what do you actually want from Apple next year? And is it any different from what you said? Oh,
totally. What I want, and one of these things I won't get, one of these things I could get, and one of these things that I'll probably get eventually. So the thing I won't get, I would like, because there's so much controversy about what ports the MacBook Pro should have. Should it have HDMI? Should it just have a bunch of Thunderbolt? Does it have too many, too few, whatever? I would love it if Apple would make a really slick dock that had all the ports possible and that was integrated with the operating system in such a way that you could plug the dock in and it would automatically shift your audio inputs, or it would maybe you could even have a Stream Deck in that dock for all those nerds who like to punch buttons and automate things. I mean, just make an Apple styled, Apple level of sophistication dock for the MacBook Pro and stop fighting about how many ports are we going to have. Just make something really cool. So I'm not going to get that, but I think that would be fun.
It might be fun, yeah. I like the idea of a Stream Deck, honestly, but, the only reason I don't have a Stream Deck is because I'm like, and then what? Like, what would I do with it? Because I'm not streaming. So.
Right. Well, it's the people use Stream Deck buttons to automate things. So the intended purpose is you use it so that you can manage streaming and all the multiple channels that go into streaming. Right. But what people do is they make a button that says, open this app or run this shortcut or whatever. And so I don't need that either. Yeah. But why not? If Apple is going to have a super swell dock, why not make it a Stream Deck as well?
No, if I get a Stream Deck, I'm streaming. But that's the thing. I'm not streaming. Mm-hmm. Like seriously, for the 6 months or 5 months maybe that I did macOS Can Live again in 2020 into 2021, I was like, man, I could have a thing and I could punch a thing and a thing would come up. And it's like, or I could not stream.
Yeah, well,
which it would be.
I think if I was gonna stream, the number of things to have to sort of juggle in the air at once in order to stream.
Yeah.
I would want something that would make it easy so that I wouldn't have to be thinking about the streaming all the time. Like,
Yeah.
the worst thing in the world is when somebody, the first thing they say is, well, we're having some technical difficulties right now. We're trying to get set up. Can you hear me?
Well,
and it's just like, stop.
Unless somebody from Shelly's purchasing department is listening, in which case you wouldn't believe the problem we had with that crap laptop you've got her work. Crap top, I actually call it. I don't even know why. So please buy her something new. What's the thing that you think you might get, or that you think you'll get someday? You said you had 2 more things.
Yeah, the thing that I think, the dock we're not going to get. The thing someday we're going to get is some sort of AR-enabled glasses or wearable. And I hasten to add, it must be fully accessible, because I don't want it so that I can look at fanciful virtual reality. I'm interested in the AR aspect because I would like to have enhanced navigation. I would like to apply machine learning to identification of scenes and objects and people and all those good things. Mm-hmm. And that we started to get that when Apple added LiDAR and an accessibility specific feature in the last generation of phones. And so the promise of AR for accessibility is so great. Again, especially I think Apple is uniquely suited to doing a good job of it, because there's all these devices and pieces of software out there that kind of sort of aim at it, but they miss the mark. Mm-hmm. And if Apple was really committed to it, I think it would be super cool.
This year?
No, it's not going to happen this year, I don't think.
Okay, what about an announcement this year?
You know what they could do? I mean, that was the thing about the LiDAR. When they started putting LiDAR both in the iPad Pros and in the Max and Pro phones, mm-hmm. What that said was, not only are we doing this for photographers, but we're making an accessibility application to it. And they could do something like that next year, where you add a feature or a technology, or even open up some sort of software functionality mm-hmm. that points and hints, because, I think it'll be pointing and hinting next year.
Massive disappointment that the LiDAR wasn't in the entire 13 line. And I don't know if that has to do with, again, the component constraints and things like that, or if it's just that, we're not going to be ready with that for another couple of years. So there's no point in pushing it out to the masses.
Same.
Yeah. What's the last thing?
The last thing is, people always talk about Apple monitors, the Pro XDRs. People spend multiple thousands of dollars on computers, and then they spend something similar on monitors. I will mm-hmm. never be that person. I have a $140 Dell 24-inch monitor here. It does what I need it to do. Mm-hmm. And I don't expect Apple to sell me a bargain basement monitor. But if Apple wanted to make a monitor that was somewhat reasonably priced, probably twice the price of this Dell monitor, but that had integration with the computer, and that was a high quality monitor and took advantage of the high resolution that those computers can drive, I think that would be great, because I'm really kind of tired of people talking again, and then often it's the same people that are lusting for Mac Pros and who end up getting Mac Pros, and they're not doing visualization or making movies, but it seems reasonable to them to spend $1,000 on a monitor, and they're angry with Apple because Apple doesn't have a monitor to meet that need. And I'm like, well, I'm angry with Apple because they don't have a monitor that's a little lower down in the pecking order that still takes advantage of the features of the horsepower that those Macs have.
Man, you say, though, twice as much as what you have currently. If Apple made a monitor that was only between $250 and $300, and I don't throw around only $300 lightly at all, but if Apple made a monitor that was that inexpensive relative to other Apple stuff, it'd be a 5-year wait.
I agree. That's why I don't think I think it's certainly within their ability to do it, regardless of whether it's that price or whether it's $500, even half the price of an XDR or something. But I agree with you. I think if you made anything that was hinting at value, that's going to be a hard thing to get.